When it comes to working with backend APIs in React Native, you are pretty spoiled for choice because you can use the browser familiar APIs like fetch, and additionally any other libraries that you might be using within the front end to access the backend will probably also work in React Native, so let's take a look. Now the API that we are going to be using for this demo is something that is provided by a service that everybody uses, which is GitHub. There is an endpoint api.github.com/users where you can provide a user ID to fetch their details. Now there is a lot of information on screen, but we will focus on fetching these two properties, which is name as well as bio. Now within the skeleton React Native application, we will create a file called github.ts where we will write the code to get this data from GitHub. We define the user type, which contains the fields that we care about, which are just the name and the bio. And then we create this async getBio function, which takes a GitHub username, generates the URL that we saw previously, which contains this username, then passes this URL to make a fetch request, awaits that request to get the response object, then passes that response stream to JSON, and finally returns the object's name and bio. Now there is nothing React specific about this code, it's just a nice wrapper around the fetch request. But let's jump into our app component, bring in the getBio function and the user type, and then try and use them within our app component. We create a state variable which will store the user details, which we initialize to null because we haven't loaded the user yet. And then when the component gets mounted, we make the request to get bio with the user ID, and then use the response to set the user details within React state. Once the data is loaded, we can conditionally render the view, and the view will contain two child views or child view sections. The first section has the name and the user.name, and the second section has the heading bio along with the value of user.bio. And as you can see in the rendered UI, there is nothing stopping us from using fetch code written for the browser safely and easily within React Native. Now, as you mentioned, you're not just restricted to using fetch, you can use other libraries as well. For example, Axios is a library that's used in front-end code even without React and even in back-end code, and you can use that with React Native as well. We open up the terminal and execute npm i Axios to install Axios into our React Native project. And with that out of the way, let's open up that GitHub file. And the first thing that we will do is bring in that Axios default export so that we can use it within our getBio function. We delete the existing fetch-based code and rewrite it with Axios. And in my opinion, the Axios code is slightly cleaner because it does the JSON transformation for us automatically based on the response content type. Now you might not have noticed it, but the UI has actually automatically refreshed and run the code based on Axios. But just to make sure that you can see it in action, I'm going to replace my username with someone who I look up to. And you saw that as soon as I saved the file, the request was made with Axios and we see the updated name and bio. Thanks for joining me. Smash that like and share this video to support more tutorials like this, and I will see you in the next one.